The following is a conversation with Menno Hahury, a co-founder and chief technology officer of EduFace, a Dutch EdTech startup. Menno has an academic background in artificial intelligence and is currently furthering his studies in the field. EduFace began as a digital marketplace for academic textbooks and has since evolved into a platform that allows automating the creation of educational materials and providing feedback. Today, we will discuss his experiences, challenges in education, and the future of technology in teaching. So, without further ado, let's begin. Hi, Menno. It's lovely to have you here. I'm glad that you found some time to share some of your knowledge with us. And maybe to start with, can you share what inspired you to create EduFace?
Yeah, I'll start with that. First of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, the reason I started EduFace, it needs a little backstory because initially we had a completely different idea. We didn't start even with the name EduFace. We started with BlockBook. We started in a time where study books in the Netherlands are very expensive and students had no extra money to buy them, which made it very difficult. And the secondary market was really tough and books were like destroyed or really bad quality. So we wanted to do something in that world first. So we created some kind of blockchain platform on which you could buy these books, but then as an ebook. And then after you've done your studies, you're done reading your material, you could even sell it on the secondary market. So it was the first time ever ebooks could be traded on the secondary market. And the publishers from the books could even get some money from those books because we would just make a commission every time you would sell it further. So we started with that idea first. It was very nice. And in that time as well, that was around to start maybe end 2022. The first generative AI algorithms came out. We made a small chatbot on which you could ask questions based on the book you were reading. And that's the part where we got the most feedback on it, which was great. They were like, oh, we would love this, we would further. And then I was at that time, I think in my last year of my bachelor AI, and I got approached by a teacher and he was saying like, I have so much trouble with creating my students or giving good feedback because I just don't have the time. The work pressure is a lot in the Netherlands. And so he asked me to create a tool based on what he saw at BlockBook. So I created a small module. I just made a simple API with some models that were already out there, gave him some prompts that he could use and then let him upload. And the results were amazing. He was like, wow, this saves my time like by at least 50%. I could just use this and then fine tune it myself and then give it back to the students. He said you should do more with this. Now, once we did some more research, we found that almost all teachers spend about 10 to 20 hours a week giving feedback. They have to do this long in the after hours, so in the evenings, in the weekends, so it takes a lot of time. And on the other side, the students still think they get not enough feedback on their assignments, just not enough. So that's actually the reason we then started. Based on that first project and based on that research, we saw a problem also as ourselves, because I sometimes also submit my paper or my essay and I get like 2 sentences of feedback. Yeah, there's no way to learn from 2 sentences. Like it's just no chance. So based on that, based on the idea that we're still students and we see the problem for teachers, we want to help them. So based on that, we started. So that also our team is fully out of students. So we all have the same problem. And that's the reason why we started EduFace. And BlockBook was still an old name from the old company. That's why we moved to EduFace.
And this sounds like you created your product out of a need. A need that was already present in your clients, let's say, in the school, in your educational system. But it seems like a global problem.
Yes.
So are you planning, for example, to attack another markets, in Europe or abroad?
But then a few months later, we went to an event in the Netherlands by SURF. SURF is a big organization in the Netherlands. And we got in contact with several companies like Scorion and Paragin. They are big portfolio platforms. And they were also interested in building maybe an AI tool themselves or maybe buying one to give feedback on these students' portfolios in the world, because they were all over the world. So they were like, could you also expand to other places? That's when we first figured out, okay, this is not only here, this is all over the world. So that's when we also decided to go to BET the first time in January. And that was a very nice experience. We saw that schools were really coming to us. And we did a lot of advertisement and at first before BET, but also at BET itself, a lot of schools were like, oh, it was looking for this company. I found you here. I really find this interesting because my school has this and this and that. So now we have like contacts all over Europe and some further over the world. So that's like, for now, that was our sign, like, okay, we need to expand this further because it's not only in the Netherlands, it's all over the world.
Interesting, and it's lovely to hear that because your product is very interesting, and if it's built upon a real need, that's that are the products that we should embrace. And how big are you at the moment in terms of, I don't know, teachers using the tool or schools?
Yeah. So we're now busy for a little more over a year. And we started with a free account, so we could get some feedback from teachers, could evolve our tool. So we have around 200 to 300 teachers individually using our tool. But after that, we saw that's not smart to license it only to teachers. We have to license it to the whole school. So now we're really expanding. So like we limit the free account is gone, so you could only do it testing with a pilot with us now. And we have around I would say 20 schools in the Netherlands. We're starting pilots with either soon or first semester next year. And after that, we filtered out most. We have around 20 to 30 schools that are interested in the tool from outside that we talk to on that. And once we also notified, so we're also are expanding our leads now further, especially first to the countries with English language teaching, so especially UK, because we also got some questions like, can your model do, I don't know, Scandinavian or Portuguese? But that's a bit difficult because it has to be in the pre-training. So that requires a lot more extra work. So we're focusing first on especially the English schools.
So one market at a time.
Yes.
And you are starting with UK, do I get it right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you mentioned something interesting at the beginning, that your product used blockchain.
Yeah, our very first project.
So is it using the blockchain right now as well, or it's
a
story of the past?
Yeah, it was really of the past because the blockchain made sure the right student at the right time had the rights to that book and that he could easily transfer that right to a different student.
So you pivoted a lot.
Yeah, it was a major pivot. Yeah, it was like, and I think November 2023. Yeah, that was like when I discussed with my co-founder. He was like, we should do this pivot because we see way more enthusiasm and way more need in this market than in the other market. Yeah, in the AI market. Yes, correct.
That's clear for me that AI is so much hyped that you should surely follow that building a product. But can you share why have you resigned from blockchain? Why haven't you incorporated that into the further development?
Yeah, especially the blockchain technology, right? Yeah. First of all, it's very difficult to safely build blockchain. Also around a bit of the public view of blockchain was not that positive at that time, especially. And the reason we don't use blockchain now is it's not particularly necessary. We are integrating our tool into the big LMS systems like Brightspace and Canvas. We have our own platform at EduFace, and we don't need the blockchains to transfer the rights between persons because they have just rights to the tool, which is completely different from owning a product or owning a book, for example.
That's a common story that I hear speaking with founders about blockchain, that they were first like, right, let's have this technology incorporated because it's sexy, everyone talks about it, and we want to have it. It has the great selling points, and we want to try. But then when we realize that we don't really need blockchain to do the basic stuff, you start to withdraw.
Yeah.
Can you see a similar risk here with AI, that maybe we are a little bit overhyped and in like 2 years time we will be saying, oh no, we don't use AI anymore, it's just
That's a very interesting question. I think there is a hype at the moment, but I don't think that hype will completely vanish. I think it's overhyped at the moment. Everything's like, oh, we're building this because AI can do this and this. But in the end, it's still a word prediction. It can't really think, all these large language models, they're just very good at predicting the next word. There's not a real thought behind it or real process. But I think it will not vanish like blockchain technology, or I think it's still necessary because the use cases are very big, and the way the training goes right now, if you look at DeepSeek, for example, the open source world is growing a lot by each minute. So these models will get better and better. The open source world will upload it, especially in Europe, also with regulations. There are more open source models you can use. People can train, they share their knowledge. And that way these models will become so good that I don't think you can't not use them in your life anymore after some time.
Especially in education, where you have to process so much knowledge, so much words. I see lots of benefits actually, and you're mentioning some of them. But I guess talking about benefits of AI in education is pretty easy. You mentioned some of them already, but can you maybe talk about potential risks as well? Should we consider it? Should we be worried?
I think worried maybe, but we have to be careful with how we implement it. For example, I talked with a different school. They were implementing their AI tool themselves, and they were just throwing it at their teachers. Use it, do whatever you want with it. And I talked with my old teacher. He's a very known speaker in the Netherlands, Pim Hazelager. He is a lot about ethics of AI. And he was very upset by this. He was like, how can this happen? We have to be careful with the technology and not completely trust it blindly, because the way they were using it, students handed in their assignments, they get checked by AI and no teacher in between. So that's the dangerous part. We have to have a human on the loop, at least. And so we created a system where you can get, indeed, feedback from an AI system, but as a teacher, you still have to check it. Well, I had this interesting discussion last week at the Radboud AI event. How much checking is enough? Because after some time, probably teachers will start trusting the system, see, oh, it works, I'll trust it. They'll just checkbox, and they'll hand in. And that is, I think, the risk of AI, that we start trusting it blindly and just see how easy it is to save time, and then blindly trust it. That's the dangerous part.
And what about the teacher? That's the teacher side, but what about the student side?
And then do you mean receiving feedback from AI or using AI?
Using AI.
I read a paper yesterday about cognitive offloading, which means putting work that you usually do yourself to a chatbot, like, for example, summarizing. And I read that it's very dangerous because you can't work autonomous anymore. I was in an open study room of this university, and I was working on my own paper, and eventually ChatGPT there was an error or something. You couldn't use it for like 5 hours. And you saw like students looking at each other like,
what do we do now?
What do we do now? Yeah, it was really that case. You were looking at them around, so like, but how does work? And then they were started questioning the TA, because the TA was there to answer questions. Never got any questions, because everyone was just ChatGPT. And then he got overloaded with questions because nobody understood anymore what the assignment is about or what they had to do. So that's really dangerous, to completely blindly trust on such a system and don't think for yourself anymore.
You are talking about the higher education, and from my perspective, the lower or secondary education can be also endangered by not understanding the text you are reading. Reading comprehension is one of the most important skills from my perspective, and it's one of the most difficult to teach. And now when everything can be summarized so easily, my God, I'm worried about that part of lower education. Right, but you mentioned a little bit about ethical considerations. And maybe how do you, at your product, at EduFace, how do you approach these challenges?
Yeah. So for now, we're fully focused on giving feedback. I'll also talk about grading, because we are implementing that soon. I'll first start on feedback. For the feedback part, especially on feedback on the end submission, the teacher has to be on the loop. So he has to see what the AI gives as feedback. Before that, so we also have a formative side. That is especially the part that teachers and students like most, that they can hand in their assignment, get feedback before the end submission when they actually get their grade part. But sometimes the teacher can even allow that the AI just directly sends feedback, because it's only individual and has no influence on the grade. But especially on the ethical side, when the end submission is, we try to force the teacher to see all the feedback made by the system, check them, and let them agree with them. By making a system, we have comments that we place in assignments, like specific highlights in the PDF, and we let them investigate each individual comment before being able to upload the assignment back to the student.
So basically, you're creating a tool that is supporting teaching process and not replacing it, not replacing the human interactions.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. The way we presented it earlier this year was there was this famous football game in 2014 for the Netherlands against Spain. And there was this crazy assist on Robin van Persie. That's how we describe it. We are the assist to eventually where the teacher can finish the job and finish the goal.
What is the feedback from students and teachers actually once you've built the product, once you delivered it? You said that at the beginning there was a need, you supported it. Then you went to bed last month at the conference. I guess your product was received very positively. But what feedback do you get daily from the teachers?
From the teachers, we especially got that they really like that it saves time. So out of our estimations, but now also proven by actual cases, we see that we save around 10 to 15 minutes per assignment. They really like the workaround, so that it's really easy to make still changes, delete some AI comments, add their own comments itself. So the workaround around it is made very easily. And the comments itself, they are most of the times in agreement with the comment. They're like, I would also say this, or this is even more detailed than I would say. So the teacher side is very positive. On the student side, we get the most positive feedback on the formative side, which means that they can ask for feedback before handing it in. We got a lot of students, for example, that want to get feedback before they get their final grade or final submission, but the teachers don't have time for that. They only have time to maybe grade it once and that's it. But our tool makes it possible to get feedback before you have to make your end submission. And that's why we got the most positive feedback from students.
I have an ethical question. Isn't that cheating? Like if you upload your material, your work to a computer, like, I don't know, verifying it with Google or ChatGPT before handing it out to the teacher. Isn't that a form of cheating?
I wouldn't call it cheating because there are also other options in doing this. Let's say in my case, for example, I have a lot of courses. They already present the rubric on which you are graded on. And they give you the assignment. You have like 3 weeks to complete the assignment. Before ChatGPT and before all generative AI, what I usually did with my friends is like, let's just make the assignment. I'll give you my assignment, you give me mine, and then let's grade it based on the rubric. So then you get students' feedback also on the same rubric. The only thing different from now is now the AI does the same thing. He also gets the rubric from the teacher and gives feedback on that. No grades yet, only just feedback on how to improve further.
Okay, just asking.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering. I guess that wraps around what you are currently doing, what problems you are solving, and that's pretty exciting. Maybe you can share a little bit about your future plans. What are in front of EduFace?
For now, our most important task is to integrate with all the LMS systems around the world. So there are a lot of them, but for now we're focusing mainly on the big ones. So Brightspace and Canvas and Moodle we are already integrated with, but still a lot of schools also use Blackboard. We want to integrate with that, and Microsoft Teams. So those are big steps. And some schools have their own version of an LMS, or they make their own version. We have to figure out a way how we can integrate our tool also in these LMS systems, because that's the easiest workaround for the teachers. They can stay in their system and use the tool from there. That's the easiest way. So we have to maybe build some kind of application that is easily integrated into their system. So that's especially on the software side. And on the AI side, we want to train the model further, not only on supervised data sets, but also we're trying to look into reinforcement learning, which means human feedback on our feedback, and train the model further. And our next step is to integrate grading as well.
Grading of your created assignments created by your system, or?
Well, grading of the students. So once they hand in their submission, now they get feedback. But then we can also give an advice on the grade to the teacher, and the teacher could still review it and then give his own version of the grade.
This all seems like a pricey development.
Yes.
And to sustain this kind of pace of development, or this amount of development, this amount of new features or expansion to new markets, you need to, I don't know, or either be very productive, use agents, copilots, and AI to do your coding, or you have to sit on a pile of money. Which case, or you have to have a great business model. Which one of you?
Well, for now, we just recently completed our pre-seed round, so we have some funds which we can work with. Thank you. So we have some funds, and I'm also very happy with the development team we have. They are very productive, especially on the LMS part. And for the AI part, AWS and Google provide very nice starter programs on which you can receive free credits to train your model with. And we're make a lot of use of those credits, because then, you can even get up to $100,000 in credits to train your tool. So that's very helpful in training our model.
So maybe that brings us to some kind of insights or advice you could share for the other people trying to bring their products into the educational sphere? Because clearly you somehow you brought your idea to life. And that's not an easy way. You have hundreds of teachers, hundreds of users using it already. So that's an accomplishment. And you did it somehow. You managed to gather around, having money for that. How do you do that? It's not,
Good question. Yeah.
Maybe you can share us some. I know it's that there's no one magic key that you turn and it simply
true.
works. What can you tell us that?
A big advantage for us was that we already found a problem. And once doing our research, it was a major problem in the Netherlands, but now we also see the world. So that's one big thing. So if you have an idea about a startup or an idea you want to implement in education, first verify it with a lot of teachers, because they are the ones, I think, your end users, or either students, of course. So really discuss with them, is this a need and you're in this situation, and would you spend money on this? Because that's the most important part. You need to make money based on your application. Well, once we figured out there were so many questions to this tool, that's when we really started to expand to like talk to schools, and eventually from that standpoint, so we got some big schools behind us. From that standpoint, we went into our pre-seed rounds and we received funding for this. And also these investors were very enthusiastic by seeing that a lot of teachers are already behind us. So what we call it, we have a kind of ambassador group, and it's a group of teachers that are really, really into the product and really want to help us. And we make them kind of part of our team. They're not part of the company, but they're part of the team behind EduFace, and they help us develop the tool and help us increase our publicity and all that. So I think that was one of the most important things, that we created a group of our users, so in this case teachers, that are so enthusiastic and so open-minded about the product that they can help us achieve funding, achieve overall publicity, achieve our first deals with schools, all these kind of things.
So they basically become your PR department?
Yes. Yeah.
And your testers as well.
Yeah, that was really nice. So we could first test the tool with them and then publish it to everyone. So we already had some feedback before publishing to the market.
And what were your technical beginnings? Because I guess the most expensive part usually is the technology. You mentioned about the cloud hosting or credits for training models, but what about that plain old technology behind that?
Yeah. The software application, as I mentioned before, we first started with BlockBook, and we made our first platform with actually all knowledge ourselves. We had one person externally that helped us. We had a little bit of funding to pay for him, and he helped, especially me as CTO, to learn all the things I need to know to build a full software application. So in the idea of BlockBook, I already built a full application, a full platform where also students and teachers could interact with. We pivoted to EduFace. It was just going back to my work, going back to my code, and make a full revision about it and transformed it into this new EduFace platform. But because we already had such a basis, it was very easy to transform it into a new system and to an MVP very early on. And after that, we had one person that was doing all the talks with the teachers. So he was just going to schools. I have this new tool. Would you like to try it? He was receiving feedback. I would like this, or this is not working yet. That feedback would get back to me and I would implement it right away back into the system. And that way we created our ambassador team of teachers around us, and we could easily improve our tool further.
So basically you have to be hands-on CTO in order to build something in this sphere.
It's very difficult to find CTOs that still have that knowledge or foundation, but I think it's best, because else you have to spend a lot of money to build such software application. Because we also compared it, like at the pivot, we were like, okay, let's say we want to build this application and just do it somewhere external. It was like costs up to 50,000, which is a lot. So building it ourselves saved a lot of money. Maybe it costs a bit more time, but it saves a lot of money, and you get a lot of knowledge from it. So easily expand from that platform to a newer platform.
Yeah, because you can spend 50 grand in a better ways. For example, going to conferences and promoting and speaking about your product and contacting with your client base, actually.
Exactly.
And were you thinking building the product, were you thinking already about a business model, like selling the thing, or you wanted just to fix the words?
We were already thinking of a business model. So my other co-founder is very business focused. He already built and sold his first company when he was 16, so he had a really experience. So that's why we had a really good division. He knew everything about business, and I knew everything about building the product. And then we had a few workers under us, one receiving a lot of feedback from teachers, others helping me build the system. And that way, with a small group, we could really fast expand because we had a few people focused on business and the others on implementing the product. And that combination was really helpful.
Lovely. So that brings us to another advice I would take from that. Have a partner that's different from you.
Yes, I would definitely recommend that. Yes, we have a very good relationship, and it's also very nice. We have our own things. We discuss everything together, but we both have our knowledge in specific domains, and the combination of that works very well.
So if you're a technical guy, grab a businessman with your business side of the equation. Grab a technical CTO so he hands-on build the solution.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it.
So, have you been using some of these code generation possibilities today?
I've used it especially as debugging tool.
Right.
With just general coding, so our software application or our integration into LMS, the debugging tool is a lot of helpful because it has, first you were on Stack Overflow. It's a very popular page where you could ask your question when you had a problem with coding, but it was very difficult to find the answer. And now you have such an easy option where you can just ask your question and get your answer directly. So that's really helpful. And on the AI part, ChatGPT and the other tools don't have that much knowledge yet on all the new models that are out there because their training data goes only till 2023 or maybe beginning 2024. So that way, that's the most difficult part for my job and for the company is to figure out the AI market because there's a lot of knowledge there, but you have to all try and figure it out yourself. There is no rule book to follow. There are no easy questions to be asked to ChatGPT. You have to fully go in there yourself.
So basically what you're saying is you have to understand the problem and know roughly how to solve that to be able to ask appropriate questions. And then AI can help you go faster with the solution.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the perfect combination.
So that does it make easier now for the new startups to create products? Do you think that we will be flooded by similar tools, maybe not similar to you, but multiple tools that are solving the same problem built with Copilot in a day with a one person? Maybe the businessman doesn't need the CTO already.
Yeah, good question. I think it's especially way more easier to build things. So I think it would be faster to build startups. But I think you also see that a lot of startups will then fail in the first few months because they already see there are a lot of competitors already there. So that will also be the case. But I do think there are a lot of AI startups or projects coming up at the moment because of these tools are so easily accessible. You could, for example, maybe in 4 hours, you could set up an API integration with OpenAI and you could set up a tool for someone online and then you have your product. Like it's really easy to do that, but regulation wise, especially in Europe, that won't work because then you can't comply with the full regulations of the AI Act.
So do you comply?
Yes. We built our full own model. We first also were the ones that used the API integration with OpenAI. But we soon realized that it's not possible to comply with these rules. So we built our fully owned model, of course, on top of an open source model. We use Mistral. And on top of that, we did a full own training so we can be transparent on that. And on top of that, we built a small explainable AI part. It's still in production. And for now, some demos are going around in our ambassador group. But that will help teachers also understand why the AI model makes certain decisions. And it will also understand the reasoning behind it. So why does the AI model choose to give this feedback based on the rubric. So that way we can really be transparent and open, but still being compliant with the AI Act and also proving that to schools is our most toughest job.
You mean that schools are hesitant, like they are not trusting?
Yeah, they are very hesitant, but also some schools do not know what they want yet. So some schools in the Netherlands, they all have an AI policy, but some schools don't have it at all. They're not sure, do we want to open arms for the tools or do we want to close them? So it's really difficult to move in all these new waters because also for schools, it's completely new. They have like all these tools coming out and they seem like, oh, what do I need to use? Do I need to use this for this? We are also one of these new tools that are coming out. Putting up pilots now with schools, but it took a lot of time for them to start trusting us and trusting that our tool is compliant with these regulations.
Are those mainly public schools or private schools? Is there
Mostly
a difference?
public.
Mostly public.
Yeah. Is there a difference? Not that I've noticed, no.
Clearly, I would say that it's clearly one of the most difficult thing introducing not only AI tools to schools, but every tool, every new software or any new hardware, anything new to the school system. It's very difficult to introduce something new. Do you have any advice here how to approach, for example, school principals, or you start with, from what you've said, I will say that you start with teachers and then from the bottom up, the principal doesn't have the way out because all the teachers want to use it.
Yeah, it's a difficult way because indeed we tried that way, but still some decision makers, some technical officers in schools are still a bit not with open arms to these tools. So they're not, even if we come up with, we have like 30 teachers at your school that all want to use this tool, they're still like, okay, first we have to do our checks, we have to do this. I don't know if we want it because we don't have an AI policy. But I still think it's the best way, but you have to do a combination. So at least spend time on the teachers, make sure they know the tool already, make sure they like it, and make sure they can't work without it anymore. Because if you create that environment and then go to the decision makers like, your teachers use it, they have a free account with us, would you like to set up a pilot with us? And then maybe they're a bit not sure yet, then you just limit the use of the AI tool, and then the teachers will talk themselves, I need this tool, I need this for my education, then it will start to roll out.
Right, and if you have a great problem, you have a great solution, and teachers can't live without it. And we all know that in this sphere, we have multiple tools, maybe not similar to you. I don't want to compare, but tools that are solving the similar problem. Do you feel a pressure from your competition, or it's not like something you bothered?
Good question. One time, there was some time about a few months ago, we had a competitor in the same city. They were also...
You're speaking in the past tense, so I guess it's already past.
Yeah, I will come to that. But yeah, they were building as well a feedback tool. So yeah, we definitely felt the pressure. Okay, more companies know that this is a problem. They will create tools. But what most do, especially in the new ones, they only focus on building an integration with a model that's already there. But that way you can't be fully compliant. So... Yes, you can have teachers around you that like your tool, but in the end, you can't really sell to schools because they don't allow these big corporations like OpenAI or Claude. They don't allow these tools. So in that way, we really differ by making our fully own model. And that way, that gives us a really room to breathe before others catch up with us, because they have to first figure out that that's not the way. And then if they're motivated enough to still continue, they have to still build a full model around it before they can catch up to us. And also there are some other companies that were already doing this before us, but they were mainly focused on like grammar and sentence writing. So only on the writing part. We particularly focus on also learning goals and how to improve the student over time on specific subjects. So that's what really differs us from other companies that already had feedback tools.
And so if you are working on your own model, I guess you must have been moved a bit, let's say it's lightly, moved a bit with the announcement of this DeepSeek R1 model.
Mm-hmm.
Have you considered, like if you started with Mistral, have you considered the porting to DeepSeek, or is it for example for already established technology, is it a little bit more difficult to move?
We haven't moved to DeepSeek. We did discuss it, but after a few days there were already reports coming out of censorship in the model, or that it's
Oh, really?
maybe in the Netherlands there were some papers published by schools or by teachers, and also some about the bias in there is way too big. So there was already a very negative view to DeepSeek. That's why we already realized, all right, that's not an option. We did realize is now that such an open source model can be that good and almost as good
that's positive.
as like the big OpenAI models, we have to be able to move quickly. So what we've built is we have our full data set on which we train on. All our prompts, all our RAG systems around it, they're fully ready to be easily transferable to a new model. So once we see, for example, now we use a model from Mistral, it works very well. But once we see, let's say, for example, Mistral comes out with a better model that scores better on all benchmarks, then we could easily transfer our tool or our training data to the next model. It would take, of course, some time to retrain that model, but we're trying to make it as easy and as efficient as possible, because you can't, if you're building in this market that grows by the minute, you can't stay with just one model. It will be outdated, I think, in 3 months already.
Right. So basically you are generating lessons and lesson materials. Do you generate videos, graphics, or something like that as well for teachers?
No, for now it's only just in feedback and only writing. So we only give feedback to students and to help teachers save time. We are looking into an oral exam model because we also see that schools are maybe moving a bit more away from writing exams because they see all these tools and that students use them either way. There is no good checking tool yet to prove that someone used ChatGPT, for example. So some are moving to oral exams. So that's a real market we also want to expand to. So presentations and also oral exams. And that will be maybe a project for this summer to look into. Because I already made a tool, it was very easy, but it could see the body language of a student in a presentation. It could analyze that, and if we can do that and provide feedback on that, that will be a major impact for also presentations, because giving feedback presentations sometimes takes even longer than on papers.
Interesting. And I have one maybe last question. You clearly started from a teacher's need that you've heard, because you've been around, you've been close with them, you've been listening, and so that's one positive side of your person, that you are able to listen and to hear. But on the other hand, you have the technical skills and artificial intelligence understanding, so you're able to connect the dots and create a product from that. That's very rare. So congratulations on that. That you don't speak with Jensen. But that's a great thing, I guess. And maybe there is something that you are hearing from the education society at the moment. Do you hear any new needs, or do you hear any new products, ideas that you may have in your mind? Maybe you can say, may not want to share that, but maybe there's something.
Good question. What I've noticed in the Netherlands, that teachers are also doing a lot of them themselves already. So we first also did content generation. So the generation of extra tests, extra material, extra presentations for the teachers. But even though there was a lot of need for it, teachers like to do that themselves. They would set up a model for themselves on their own laptop.
Really?
Or they would, yeah, some do actually. Or they would use ChatGPT, but then the paid version, so that your data wouldn't go or use in the next training, and they would set up this small questionnaires or this small material themselves. So even though there's a big need for that, a lot of teachers figured out that it's easy to do themselves. So that's a market that would be there, but then you would have to have a very innovative idea to make it easier for teachers to use your tool, or that it's very cheap compared to also other tools. And for the rest, I think oral exams, like I already said, is a big thing. I think it will grow even further in the future, because even though writing is a core subject of students, I think a lot will go or move or make a combination of both writing and both oral exam skills to test the students even more. And that takes a lot of time for a teacher to grade, because you first have to have the conversation, then listen back, and then give feedback. If you make a tool for that, that could potentially save a lot of time.
Interesting. And that brings the one more consideration, I'll say, that if you see that teachers are doing the work themselves using, for example, ChatGPT or other models, aren't you afraid of the competition, not from the startup society, but from the big players like Microsoft or OpenAI? I know that they're not compliant at the moment, but I assume they can easily be compliant. And for example, Sam Altman is saying that you don't want to compete with OpenAI because we will outrun you. Must say that I agree with that you don't want to compete with such behemoth. And the question is whether the specialized tools like helping teachers to solve some specific need, problem, and so on, won't be dead in like 5 years from now, because OpenAI will introduce, I don't know, projects, Canvas, local European models compliant with schools. What's your take on that?
Very good question. That's a scary thought. You definitely don't want you don't want to compete with OpenAI. No, definitely not. But I think if you make such specific tools, and that's also what Sam Altman said. I think there was a research paper there was a fine-tuning on GPT-3, and then there was the model GPT-4, and the fine-tuned version for a specific task on GPT-3 still performed better than a newer model. I think because we're already starting now with building our model, and we're already receiving specific feedback from teachers on our feedback, we could create data sets and create training for our models, which would make our model that much better than all these big models. And on top of that, I think if in already a few years, already now the conversation is, the models, they consume a lot of energy and there are a lot of concerns around it. And what we try to do is we use pruning and quantization, which means trying to reduce the model's parameters, because you have models that have like multiple billions of parameters. We're trying to reduce that by deleting parameters we don't even use. And that way we can make our model really small and more compliant with the energy and sustainable goals of schools. And I think that's also a big thing, because indeed OpenAI will maybe eventually create something, but they have such big models and it costs a lot of energy to run those. So I think there we could still make a difference.
So basically you say that we will be competing on the content or merit base, not on the technology or the feature base.
Yes, I think so. But of course also the technology base. But
yeah,
we try to focus not making the model the best or the largest model. We're trying to just make it specific for this task. So the results are perfect for the needs of the teachers, but also at the same time make it sustainable so that it's easily to run and cheap to run for sustainable goals.
Yeah, one we can say that the future is unpredictable for sure. So we have to, observe the market and observe moves of the big players and the small players.
Exactly, yeah. I think OpenAI thinks the same after DeepSeek. I think they were shocked as well.
They were shocked for sure. So you have to observe always the full checkboard to be aware of all the pawns and so on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. I feel that I learned something, and I guess that there will be a clear outcome for the viewers, especially with your insights. How did you walk your path, and what are the future perspectives from what you were standing? So thank you for this conversation, Menno.
Great. Thanks for having me. I hope I bring some knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.